Okay, in the room, are we ready to be recorded? All right, welcome back, everybody. I see Dr. Noland is there. There she is. Hi, Ms. Prado. Welcome back. We are going to continue on with agenda item 5D, the AAVSD Veterinary Technician National Exam Policy regarding eligibility requirements.
So members, this is more just as an FYI, no action is requested at this time, but it's so just inform you of a situation that we're asking myself and a few other executive directors from other states are asking AAVSD to reconsider one of their policies. As I talked about in my memo, this started because a RVT program contacted me and asked about allowing RVT candidates to sit for the VTA prior to graduation. I had explained to that we don't have any statutory authority or requirements to complete any education prior to sitting for the examination. So they would have to contact AAVSD because it would be something that they would have a policy on. And so but I did say that I would contact AAVSD and find out who they could contact to have a discussion with. AAVSD responded, which I put into my memo, that they do not allow anyone to take the VTNE prior to graduating. So I provided that information to the administrator, and he came back with, well, Washington allows them to do it, and they allow them to take it 6 months prior. I did not know that, nor was I told that was an option. And so I went back to AAVSD and asked if this was a separate exception that they had. They said, yes, they are allowed to do that. And then a day or so later, I was involved in AAVSD holds quarterly executive director roundtable sessions. Out of the 63 or so jurisdictions, I think there were only maybe 15 of us there. So it wasn't a high turnout. But I figured since we had time in that meeting, I just wanted to bring it to see if there were other states who had similar questions from school administrators and if they had similar concerns. So I brought it up, and it was interesting to kind of hear how that meeting went, because one of the executive directors who said, who was actually the current president, said from Virginia, she said, yeah, we let them sit 3 months prior to graduation. Another state executive director had said, who was a prior AAVSD president, said he was told that they're in an exception, but it's not an option. And so multiple executive directors kept saying like just differing information that they were being provided. And so I had asked at that time, well, how would a state get an exception if we want an exception? So I was told that we would have to go to our individual agreements and write it into that agreement that we would make when we wanted an exception. So you're looking at then a potential for 62 or 63 jurisdictions with different exceptions that then would have to be implemented, which didn't seem really consistent to me. And if they have consumer protection concerns, if they're allowing an exception for every single state, it doesn't really seem to align. And so I asked, okay, so how would we go about formally requesting that they reconsider their policy, either revising it or rescinding it? And they said that we would have to send a letter. She had said to send it to staff, and she would send it up the chain. So I volunteered to draft that letter, and I told the executive directors on the call that if they are interested, they can jump in on the letter, which they did. There were multiple, there were 6 other states who wanted to join in on the letter. So after that conversation, I held multiple meetings with the executive directors for the letter. We drafted the letter, which is attached. And just so all of you know, the policy, which was adopted in 2008 by AAVSD, which became effective in 2011, and says that after December 31st, 2010, a VTNE candidate must be a graduate of veterinary technology program accredited by AVMA or the CVMA or a program approved by the regulatory board of the jurisdiction where the examination is given. And so in the conversations that I had with the executive directors, we really looked at the intent of that requirement, the consumer protection benefit, if any, is adding, and the impact that it has to RVT candidates. So what's happening is our RBT candidates, if they can't take the exam until after they graduate, oftentimes they have job opportunities lined up. And if they don't pass, which is not a rarity to fail that exam because it's not great pass rate, they then have to wait in order to retake it. And oftentimes they're losing that job opportunity. It's also not equivalent for veterinarians because veterinarians can take it, I think, 8 months prior to graduating. And so we're looking at, when we ask for, we recognize that this rescinding it is a really big shift in their policy. And so we're looking at alternatives. And so we had the discussion about changing it to, okay, do we want to do 3 months from prior to graduating or 6 months prior? But it goes down to the consumer protection benefit to it. The states themselves are already verifying education. So whatever the education requirements are, we're verifying it. That's our job before we issue the license. If you put a 3 months, 6 months, or whatever time frame you put on it, I think all of us know that the RBT education programs themselves are all across the board. You're not going to have any real guardrails around what has been accomplished in 6 months or 3 months, because you have the 2-month program, you have the 2-year program, and the 4-year program. So it's all going to be different. And so to pinpoint like at what point is, I don't understand the benefit to that. But also, I know that they had a concern. They were saying that it's a exam integrity issue. The concern is that if you have no requirements, eligibility requirements onto it, then you can have corporations who hire individuals to go take the exam and say, you memorize question 1, you memorize question 2, and then they steal the exam, and then it kind of circumvents the system. I understand that concern, but I think when you already allow the jurisdictions themselves to make all these other exceptions, which is happening in current day, it doesn't really, the integrity concern isn't consistent at that point either. And so the directors that are on this letter is requesting that they rescind the policy completely. I don't know if that's likely. It might be revised, which is still a win, but we're really looking at what the consumer protection benefit is, and does that outweigh the negatives of the negative impacts that this policy is having? And we don't think it is. So we want it rescinded. So I'm just providing an update. I did receive an email from I talked to the AVSB president actually as I was going to the Capitol last Monday, and she said she was going to take it to the board, which the board had met today on it. She said what likely would happen is that it would be sent to their VT&E, their committee from AVSB, and then may bring it to the executive director registrar session that's happening in the annual conference in September, and then go from there. So I know they had a meeting today. I don't know if I think Kathy was attending to share what was reported out, but I just wanted to let you know that this is what's happening. So if you hear some upset individuals, that could be why.
I can't understand their justification for this when veterinarians are allowed to take this so far in advance. And saying that, oh, well, corporations are going to memorize the test. Well, what's the difference between this and a veterinary exam? And I understand, I appreciate your hard work in doing this and your due diligence on this, because there's no justification for saying to an RBT or potential RBT candidate that you cannot take this test. You cannot go and have the same job opportunity as a veterinarian because there's a potential for stealing exam questions, but we're going to allow veterinarians to do this. We're going to give veterinarians the opportunity. That just doesn't seem fair. We're going to give veterinarians the opportunity to take a test because they're more important. She's switching computers to her chat. Okay.
So just to clarify, they were saying that if the policy goes to rescinding, if they decide to rescind it altogether, that's the concern, is if you have no verification that someone is either enrolled or has completed a portion of it, that's the concern. But if they're looking at doing something similar to what veterinarians are doing for the ICBA, they require the 8 months prior to graduation. So that's less of a concern at that point, is what they're saying. So it may be something that's equivalent to what veterinarians are allowed, but it sounds like getting them to rescind the policy completely is a bigger thing.
Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Is there a problem with running it parallel to the same thing the veterinarians are? Yeah, I mean, it looks to me like if we can get more RVPs out there and they had a better job, in the long run, it would benefit everyone and benefits practice, because we know they're expecting somebody as soon as they get their license can go to work.
Yeah, and so that was part of the discussions that we were having is what if they're not going to rescind it, is there something equivalent for veterinarians? And that's where the concern comes in when it comes to determining how long before they graduate the program can they take the exam, because veterinarian schools are more uniform of what they have completed within the first, second, third year of school, where RVT programs are really across the board and not as uniform. So that's the concern, is what would that parallel be? But I think that that's part of the discussions that they'll likely have.
Wouldn't the testing process tend to weed that out? I mean, if they had eight months, or they needed 8 more months to finish their curriculum, they should not do as well on the test, right?
And maybe a percentage complete of their, instead of it being a time, it would be like they've completed 50% of their program, and then that wouldn't matter how long their program was.
I think the concern with that one is if when you have a 2-year program versus a 4-year program, if you do 50%, then you have the 2 years, you can do it after that 1 year. If you have the 4 years, you can do it. You won't be able to do it until 2 years. You know what I'm saying? So I think if they're going to do it that way, they would have to call out this difference of the program.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a 4-year program, they still have only gone through half of their.
But they're covering a lot more than a 2-year program is covering, you know?
Yeah.
And also one thing, the fact that there are states that are being exempted from this, it does not make it equitable. I think that's a very strong argument that if it is going to be allowed, that it all be like across the board.
Yeah, and I think the difference is that there are different organizations that are providing the test. So that's why they're doing it. And I don't know why that is, but it's a bigger discussion. Public comment?
Thank you. Whoops. There, thank you very much. Just very quickly, I was on the AAVSB meeting, and just to recap, what happened at the beginning was they immediately moved into executive session on this topic, it was not scheduled to be in executive session, but as a request of their legal counsel, they moved it all, and they were in executive session for over an hour. It finally started right when we broke for lunch, and so I was able to join the meeting again. And the decision, I guess after all the discussion, whatever it was, they are moving this whole request, the policy change, et cetera, eligibility change to the VT&E committee, as you said, and then whatever recommendations they come up with will go to the board of directors. They did not announce that it was going to go to the executive directors, but or a timetable. But that it may be that it is going to also go to the executive directors, but that's really the extent of their announcement at the end of that session. So yeah, there are a lot of moving parts to that, and clearly you've started a good discussion. And that's all. So I assume in Kansas City there'll be some sort of report.
Thank you. Moderator, would you please open it up online?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists. Or you may simply raise your hand. People who have called in can raise their hand by pressing *3. And while we wait for that, can I check with Cal Poly? Do we have any public comment from Cal Poly?
No, we don't. Thank you.
Okay, and do we have any public comment from the public library?
Do not.
Okay, thank you. And I am not seeing any requests for comment from online participants, so shall I close the question and answer panel?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that concludes that agenda item. I think we need to go back now to our agenda item number 3, review and approval of board meeting minutes. So, board members, 3A, the first April meeting. Anybody have any? I need to pull mine up, but anybody have any corrections? Dr. Nolan?
I think I have one, but I guess I need clarification on page 25, about halfway down the page of the actual first meeting. I'm assuming we're doing the April 19th and 20th first.
Yes.
We use the term, in the notes, the term reappoint Andrew Dibben is there, and I'm not sure that's a reappointment. The motion uses the term reappoint.
Was he not already on? We're checking.
Yeah, I thought that. Anyway, that would be.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and verify that, but what we can do is we'll correct the record if it was not reappointed.
Okay.
Great. And then
Dr. Grant?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Nolan. I thought you were done. I'm sorry.
I'll swing back by if I need to.
You didn't have any other ones just yet? Okay. I'm sorry. I know this is I'm not sure when people are done talking, so I apologize if I'm cutting any of you off. Feel free to keep talking if that happens, please. Dr. Grant, did you have?
I'm concerned about a partial statement on page 39, the signal report of telemedicine. Seems like the wording didn't make it clear.
Okay, so we're on page 39. Were you in the top paragraph or under Brittany MSD? Can you read us the line?
Line E, right under VCPR.
Okay, so she wanted the board to recognize that throughout the country, federal and state governments each provided flexibility for the VCPR's establishment in stronger ways than California did. There has not been a single report of telemedicine as a result. It's true across the country.
Does that mean a single report of telemedicine causing harm, or?
I think we'll have to go back to the reporting and just make sure that is accurately transcribed. So we'll make a note of that. And if it is, sometimes I know I read some of the things that I said, I'm like, there's no way I said that. And I listen to it, I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't make sense like I thought it did. But we'll make sure that it's accurate there. So thank you. Anybody else? Let's see here. So I had a couple of just editing things. Let's see here on page, since we're down here, page 32. I believe that, let me go back to page 32. Brady McCarthy, I believe, is E. And he's referred to as she, so that just needs to be corrected. There's a couple of them in the that paragraph, and then down below that, in Ms. Atlas's statements, she also referred to Mr. McCarthy, but it is written as Miss instead of Mr. And page 8. After Dr. Sullivan, and this item, in the first sentence, after mobile veterinary premises, it says, which includes all types of veterinary of vehicles. So I think that the of is probably repeated there, all types of veterinary of vehicles, and that just needs to be struck.
I'm sorry, what piece?
Sorry, page 8, Dr. Sullivan underlined, and then first sentence, Dr. Sullivan summarized the explanation. Changes from the memorandum and indicated that the proposal would combine all types of mobile veterinary premises, which includes all types of veterinary of vehicles. Okay. And page 16. Page 16, Dr. Nolan responded at the bottom of the page, as a veterinarian, it would easier, probably as it would be easier for her to remember. Page 26. Under meeting materials, so 8A, board members raised her concerns. I think that's 8A, page 26. It says board members raised, I think, her concerns over the dual license authority. I think it should just say there, but. Yeah. This is another where it would be a transcript, like we have to see if it was transcribed correctly. Middle of page 27, under GB errors, if you scroll down to kind of the middle of the paragraph, some of this didn't make sense, so I don't know if you just want to listen to it, make sure it's transcribed properly, but it says, the coalition would understand that any regulation, sorry, it's actually the next sentence down, that the PTBC would consult, or the Veterinary Medical Board could consult with them as far as any PT issues there. But it is really the Veterinary Medical Board that would be doing that, because as the board identified in its recent regulation, animal physical rehabilitation as a practice of veterinary medicine, and I think it's is a practice, yeah. I don't know if that would be much. And another doesn't make sense on page 31, it was Ms. Ehrlich. Page 31, the last sentence. Or actually, in the middle, there's, she stated CARTA considered that to be risky for animal sake, as other people have pointed out, physical therapists are not trained, nor are they licensed, and will not be licensed to administer first aid. I think it should be first aid. Do animals as RVTs? And then the last sentence, she stated that there is just a very simple solution. If they want to perform physical therapy under indirect supervision, they can become an RVT. So CARTA opposes this bill because it is unnecessary, it is unaffordable, and it says unsold. So I don't know what that was supposed to be, but I don't think it was unsold. And I think that's it for me. So, all right, there's page 34, there's one. There is page 34, no, sorry. Okay, that's it for me. All right. Anything else? No hands, board members there. Should we do the next minutes first and then?
We should do these, but
Okay, all right. Any other? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes with the corrections?
I move to approve the minutes for April, is it 19th? With corrections.
Second the motion.
Okay, public comment? None in the room. Moderator, would you please open it up to the online community?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the question and answer panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or simply raise your hand. And while we give you a moment, do we have any public comment from Cal Poly?
No, we don't.
Thank you. And how about the public library? Mission Viho, do we have any public comment from Mission? Nope. Okay, thank you. And I do not see any public comment from our online participants. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. We can call for a vote.
Dr. Polito? Yes. Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Ms. Watts?
Abstain.
Ms. Cotto?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Great. Okay, moving on to the minutes of our special meeting. So that would be the May 24th meeting. Does anybody have any comments, concerns? Okay, I do not either. Oh, yes, okay, I'll let you. There's Kathy Bowler, is Bowler on page, wait, on page 6, towards the lower, the third paragraph on the bottom. I actually did have something highlighted, sorry. Page 5, Dr. Nolan, and I don't, this didn't make sense to me, kind of middle of her paragraph. The first two results, this is just under the T here, starting with the T and the draft. The first two results indicated a California veterinarian licensed in Sacramento and another California veterinarian licensed in Arkansas. Yeah, if you could just check that, because I felt like she was talking about two, in my recollection, veterinarians licensed outside of this.
No, I
I
was
think it was
actually,
located.
no, they were
Go ahead.
located, they were both licensed in California, but they were located physically in other areas outside of Los Angeles.
Okay.
I think that because I listened to everything and went back, and I think that actually makes sense in the context of what she's saying.
Okay.
When you read the whole.
If you could just check and make sure that's correct. Okay, yes. You're just checking. Okay. All right, so do we have a motion for these minutes? Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the board meeting minutes for May 25th or 24th. As amended. there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Public comment? None in the room. Moderator, please.
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. Call-in users can press *3. And while you do that, do you have any comment from Cal Poly?
No, we do not.
All right, and how about our public library?
Do not.
Okay, thank you very much. And I am not seeing any requests for comment from our online attendees. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. For vote.
Dr. Salcedo?
Yes.
Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Ms. Pulaski?
Abstain.
Ms. Prado?
Oh, actually, I
Okay.
abstain on the,
Yes.
sorry. I'm sorry. I abstain on the May one. I was not there. My apologies.
Okay, thank you.
We're just deciding on whether we have enough votes to pass it, given.
I can vote in there.
Kathy vote. Or we have.
So I think the recommendation is to hold it until the next meeting.
Okay. We're gonna hold that till the next meeting. All right. So Ms. Schufelt, are you on the line?
I am. Hello.
Hello.
You guys can hear me? Hello. Oh, right. Thank you for having me. I'm Leah Schufeltz from the MDC, and the MDC subcommittees have been hard at work over the last couple of months working on various items for the board's consideration. In the last few months, we've also onboarded 2 new committee members in Dr. Waterhouse and Kathy Bowler, who are both familiar to the board, so we're excited to have them join our committee. And while we did have multiple updates available, many of our subcommittees were not quite ready for action from the MDC or the board. So we decided that rather than hold a meeting that would only last about an hour and have mostly updates, we would cancel this July meeting, which would have been yesterday, and push those items to our next meeting in October. But I will go over some specifics of what subcommittees have been working on with you here. So the first of those subcommittees would be our medical record keeping subcommittee, which is composed of Dr. Sullivan and Marie Essery, RVT. And the medical record keeping subcommittee drafted proposed language to the existing medical record keeping regulations to address concerns raised by the equine community, and the inapplicability of some of these requirements based on the type of premises and or services being provided. The subcommittee then met in person with the board's executive officer, regulation council, and the CVMA to walk through the proposal. The proposal, which will be presented at the October meeting, amends the regulation to, among other things, more closely align with the SOAP process veterinarians use when treating patients, differentiates between individual records and records for a group of animals, and adds a requirement to record any veterinary services or recommendations that were declined by the client. The next subcommittee would be our shelter regulation subcommittee, which is composed just of Dr. Sullivan from the MDC. in order to allow him to more immediate collaboration and feedback from Dr. Salacito, who is, of course, a board member. And so Dr. Sullivan met with Dr. Salacito, the board's officers, Regulation Council, and CVMA multiple times to reconstruct the minimum standards for animal shelter regulations. Prior to bringing to the MDC and the board, the subcommittee is planning a meeting with various shelter representatives and stakeholders to solicit their feedback on the proposal. Next would be our Animal Blood Bank Subcommittee, which is composed of Drs. Bradbury and Waterhouse. And the Animal Blood Bank Subcommittee has met with the board's executive officer, legal counsel, and the CDFA to go over frequently asked questions from blood bank stakeholders, CDFA pending regulations, and ways the board and the CDFA are regulating animal blood banks. The MDC's Animal Blood Bank Subcommittee is working with CDFA to draft and disseminate frequently asked questions for our website, social media, and email subscribers. The Blood Bank Subcommittee will meet with CDFA quarterly to ensure the board and CDFA remain on the same page and up to date on blood bank related activities. Our next ongoing subcommittee is the Complaint Audit Subcommittee, composed of Drs. Bradbury and Sequoia. And the Complaint Audit Subcommittee is currently working on the board strategic plan goal 1.4, which is to analyze the effectiveness of current complaint prioritization defined in BPC section 4875.1. They have researched prioritization methods of other California healing arts boards and other state veterinary boards. They've made recommendations on ways to further break down case priorities into 4 categories: urgent, high, and 2 types of routine cases. Depending on the final recommendations, some may be able to be implemented internally. Any legislative changes will be necessary will come to the MDC or board in October. And our Equine Practice Subcommittee is Dr. Sullivan and Marie Assery. And the Equine Practice Subcommittee will be contacting the CHRB Executive Director shortly to discuss the board's concerns raised regarding the rulemaking specific to CCR Section 1867. So those are updates from multiple of our subcommittees. And then as far as pending assignments, we have Strategic Plan Goal 6.2, which is evaluating the feasibility of the 20% annual inspections mandate. A subcommittee has been placed on hold pending the development and launch of the inspection mobile app that is forthcoming. Spectrum of Care is being worked on, writing an article explaining the spectrum and care and developing of frequently asked questions. And another subcommittee has been formed to convert the California law exam into a California law course. And as far as strategic plan goal 4.7, examining licensure exemptions in BPC section 4827, excluding livestock to protect consumers and animals from unlicensed practitioners. Also a subcommittee on evaluating RVT pathways. And lastly, the MDC had been tasked with looking into holistic medicine, but we would like to ask the board for more specific tasks or outcome you would like us to focus on. Considering holistic medicine is very broad, and with more specific guidance, we think the MDC will be able to better understand expectations and plan accordingly. So, thank you. Questions?
Great, thank you so much, Leah. Thanks for all your hard work. It was, I missed seeing you. I can see you there, but I'm looking at my screen, but okay, any questions from the board?
Do we need to have a discussion then on our thoughts on holistic medicine at this time?
I think everything good, yeah. Go ahead.
I guess I could start off. I mean, I would like to have somebody to evaluate, trying to protect the consumers and the patients as to when holistic medicine steps in without a complete diagnosis and or comparing other surgical or medical interventions that are more traditional. Is there harm being done by people thinking that because they're going to get an injection, what not to be better off with a herb, as an example. I don't know whether we have that data or not, or if it's possible to get it. That's one of my concerns. Also, I see a number of horses with spinal injuries that are injured by misdiagnosis or over aggressive manipulations when if they had done the proper workup, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I have similar concerns with holistic medicine, and it is hard to narrow down in my mind because it is such a broad, it's kind of a broad term, and we don't have any standard of care. I mean, we don't even have experts on it. Jessica, maybe you can guide this discussion a little bit because this arose from, I think, some consumer complaints.
So we have received consumer complaints against veterinarians who perform holistic medicine. When we send those to our subject matter experts, there has been quite a bit of them who are not comfortable with opining on holistic medicine because they do not agree with that type of practice, or they don't know enough information about what would be considered the standard of care. We have been able to get one subject matter expert who is willing to take one of our pending cases, but I think that the overall concern is that it seems like the majority of our subject matter experts don't believe what's being done is within the standard of care, and therefore either don't want to take the cases, or that they just don't want to opine on these cases. But in the meantime, we have these cases that are pending because no one is wanting to take them.
So would those cases involve some aspect of incomplete or misdiagnosis? And that's why the people had a complaint coming in that they were, I wouldn't say robbed of the chance, but not given the chance to have a complete workup done that was a treatment that wasn't necessarily efficacious.
So I think we have a few different scenarios. I can't go into specifics, but generally they come from either a consumer whose animal was harmed and they don't know much of why, right? The complaint is my animal was harmed, the veterinarian caused it. And that's where we go into more of, okay, we have to investigate what was done, get the record, get the response, and we need subject matter expert to opine whether or not the standard of care is followed. We also have other veterinarians who are filing complaints against these holistic veterinarians who are saying that they are not providing standard of care. So I think it's across the board.
Dr. Nolan and
Yes, thank you. I think that if you look at the UC Davis website, they have an integrative medicine program now. Most veterinary schools now do. I think that a lot of the issue from a board standpoint is to find subject matter experts, much as we have to do with exotic animal cases, equine animal cases, food animal cases. We have to try to find subject matter experts, perhaps relying on our universities and whatnot, so that we can successfully review cases. I think that's the crux of what we need to do as a board.
Christy?
Well, thank you, Dr. Nolan, because you just said what I was going to say. I don't really need to repeat it. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's integrative medicine, and it's out there, and we have to embrace it. And so it's not alternative medicine, integrative medicine. So I believe that there are more and more out there, and I think we need to find them. And I know that they are at every conference. So I know that I have met many of them. I have moderated talks for many of them, and so they're out there, and we just need to tap them on the back and say, you need to come and be an expert with externally an expert.
Is somebody talking? Because I don't think Diana or Leah are able to hear anybody.
This is the moderator. I am not hearing anyone either. This is a moderator, and I just messaged the webcaster, and he said to stand by that the call had dropped, so he's working on it.
So, I think, are we good? Sorry. Okay. I did it again. I thought it was good. So I think the intent, I think it's partially me who brought this up, is that I don't even think we understand the scope of the different holistic practices. I think some people are very good at integrating with the typical things that are taught in veterinary schools, and then there's other practices that go very far outside of and actually tell people not to do those things. And I guess unless there's a complaint about them, we can't, opine on it anyway. I know in human medicine, which I always think it's funny when I say that only veterinarians say human medicine, I think, but in human medicine, it seems like they've actually specifically split that off, into holistic practitioners and such. But it sounds like the best thing to do at this point is to take off of the MDC's plate, maybe do some more outreach. And would it be helpful to ask the UC Davis group to come and give a presentation on what their definition and points on integrative medicine, since that's one of the main schools that we are licensing people from California.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we can do that, take it off the NBC's plate, and if, as we go down this path, we come up with specific things that we do need done, we can examine that. Does that sound good?
How about including Western too?
I love that, yeah, that'd be great, yeah. Okay, I don't think we need a motion for that. How about public comment?
Hi, Grant Miller from the CVMA, and if you can answer this question during public comment, great. If you can't, that's okay. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that holistic medicine is meant to mean acupuncture, chiropractic, and herbs? Is that where the complaints are coming in, or what else are we talking about besides that?
I mean, I think there's ozone therapy, there's, waving wands, crystals, I mean, who knows what.
Okay,
yeah.
so more than just those things. Psychics, okay.
That's the problem, is there's no real defined.
Okay, so two prominent people come to mind beyond UC Davis that you may want to consider asking to present. One is Nara Robinson from Colorado, and the other one is Dr. Shen Xie from the Qi Institute. He's one of the foremost herbologists. I'm a certified acupuncturist and a certified chiropractor. I've been doing both for upwards of 20 years. And I feel like they have a wealth of knowledge in those areas to discuss, especially in the area of herbs, because they're just drugs. They really are. They're very powerful drugs, actually. And so it might be helpful for the board if we're looking at cases. I can understand how these cases could be very difficult to try to discern where something went wrong or right. But if we're looking at cases in which herbs were at least prescribed, I think that there's a big wealth of knowledge with Dr. Xie and his book, which is our Bible. It's like our herb Bible. And if he may be of assistance, there may be some value there in having him come. Or if we had a subcommittee at the MDC, that might be a good resource. Thank you.
Can you share their contact information?
Sure, I'll make a note to myself and send you an email.
Okay, I don't see any other public comments in the room. Moderator, would you open it up online, please?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or simply raise your hand while we wait for that. Is there any public comment from Cal Poly?
No, there isn't.
Thank you. And how about the public library?
None.
None? Okay. We check our attendees. All right, I see no public no request for public comment from the attendees. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please, moderator. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to agenda item 7, update discussion and possible action on 2023 legislation impacting the board, DCA, and the boards of veterinary profession.
All right, so the first item on the agenda is the Assembly Concurrent Resolution 86. This was sponsored through Social Compassion's Judy Mancuso's resolution. I had several conversations with Judy on the intent of the resolution, and the whole intent is to address the over pet population and to encourage additional spay and neutering services. The resolution is moving through the process and is moving smoothly. Haven't had any brick walls yet. The resolution is rather large, but the specific part of it and the reason why it's on this, why we're tracking it, is because it specifically does call out the Veterinary Medical Board, and it says resolved by the part of it says resolved by the Assembly of the State of California and the Senate thereof concurring that the Veterinary Medical Board, with support from the governor, other state boards and agencies and interested stakeholders, encourages out-of-state licensed veterinarians and registered veterinary technicians to become licensed in California to perform the necessary spay and neuter surgeries and other medical services in order to address pet overpopulation. I don't have any concerns with this resolution. It's essentially us recruiting for more veterinarians and RVTs to come to the state, which would be great for California consumers. So I don't have any concerns with that, but I just wanted to let you know that this is moving through the process.
Okay, any questions?
So are they sort of thinking like you would change the Practice Act a bit so a veterinarian who knows how to spay cats and dogs or could come in and work at someone's hospital and under their guidance and do it without being licensed? Or they're
No.
the person that failed pass to get a state license in California, correct?
Yeah, that was part of the many conversations that I had with Judy and her team is I let them know, I showed them our processing timelines, all the streamlining that we've done to license out-of-state veterinarians, and they were happy with our processing times, and they noted how much the licensing team has improved that, and so they were comfortable with that. What they want to do now is focus more on recruitment. So they don't want to make any changes to the Practice Act. They just want to partner with the governor's office to solicit more out-of-state licensees to become licensed in California. So after this takes effect, I can work with our team on providing them really streamlined information, concise information of how to get them licensed as quickly as possible.
Just as an aside, it's out in the conventional wisdom, is getting a license in the state of California thought to be tougher than other states? Is the exams here?
Yeah, so it used to, and I think the general consensus from the other states is that if they don't know about all of the legislative changes the board has done in the last few years, then they think that it is tougher. That was one of the biggest complaints that I received when I went to the first conference at AAVSB was how tough it was to get licensed in California. The board has since made a lot of legislative changes to streamline it. That second examination was repealed by the board because it was duplicative of the national exam. So there's been a lot of changes that have happened that really makes it a lot more streamlined to become licensed in California.
And how do we feel about the quality and protecting the consumer?
So I think when the board was looking at the requirements and statute in order to become licensed, the main driver of that was consumer protection. What barriers are necessary for consumer protection and what are unnecessary? At the time that some of these statutes or requirements were put in place, there might have been a consumer protection benefit at that time, but as the practice of the practice of I'm not even blinking. As it progresses, then it needs to move with the practice. When you have processes that can improve, sometimes the requirements they put on in the past are obsolete because there's better ways of doing it. So the changes that the board had made with the driver of consumer protection, they removed the unnecessary barriers while still maintaining the same level of consumer protection.
Yeah, what we found was that the NAVLE, I think, had actually been updated enough to where it was testing for things that are specific to California. And the reason the California exam existed initially was that the NAVLE was not covering those things, but as things had, I like on the word too, but as it evolved, that is the word, yes. The NAVLE had started incorporating those things. So we actually had a whole process where there was, we hired somebody to actually look at the exams and compare them and make sure that the NAVLE was adequately testing for all of the proficiencies needed to practice in California specifically. And it was, except for some of the law things, which is why we now have an online law exam, but it's more of an open book. You know, it's more educational than trying to exclude people. And so, so that was why that all happened.
So then is it just a matter of affordable housing? You get people to come in and like other professions too? I mean, even hiring universities and stuff to get somebody to come, again, afford to buy a house here.
Or grants or other things, but I think that's her goal, is to try and bring some resources from the state, and I think we have already achieved the part, at least at this time, where we've achieved things that she's asking for, so we're in good shape. I think if this were in statute, then perhaps in the future, if there's a whole different board and the licensing time for out of state, started to lag again, and there were problems, then there would be this to lean back on to try and push them, I think, is the goal of that. So it's, Dr. Nolan.
Are you aware if the student chapter of the AVMA is having their meeting here in 2025? Is that happening? Remember how they applied
Yes,
for it?
I believe, yeah, that was reported at the last board meeting. They had requested that it be added in California. The board sent a letter of support requesting that it also is in California. So it was, she reported at the last meeting that it is going to be held in California.
Well, I think from an outreach standpoint, perhaps having some sort of presence at those national meetings, maybe we start with the one that's here in California, but I know they have, you know, the booths and whatnot that students can go around, and maybe we ought to, as a vet med board, as an outreach, have a booth trying to articulate the reduction of barriers to apply to California.
I think that's a great idea.
Yes.
And from that standpoint, the AEP's having their annual meeting in San Diego this fall too, so that would be a place, you know, the number of students that are interested in horse practice, attend that meeting and look for internships and whatnot, and have presence down there and let people know what it's like to get a license in California, you know, what they have to go through, probably something to consider.
So just a clarification, so this bill is really trying to address the availability of resources to address pet overpopulation, right, for spay and neuters. And the way that it's written, the intent is to recruit out-of-state veterinarians.
Yeah, it's not a bill, it's a resolution, it's different, but yeah, the intent of this piece of it is to encourage them to come.
Yeah, so to encourage, yeah, so for me, I mean, hey, that's great. That is if the veterinarians from out of state wanted to move out here to California and be a California veterinarian or VT. Now, I just wanted to throw this out there. There's been a lot of programs wherein out-of-state veterinarians work with organizations, you know, they go to Texas, they go to, and there are special permits that are being issued out that is connected with the organizations, and they accomplish a lot of this space and neuters. So I'm just thinking, is that something that maybe can be explored? Because again, the question is, do vets really want to move to California? It looks like a lot of vets want to move out of California. So maybe this is something, you know, to explore. There are people that are willing to help. They just don't want to commit long term. So I'm just putting it out there.
Maybe that's something for a future discussion. But it's an interesting thought. So for this bill, I think we need to decide, are we going to support codes or not do anything, wait and watch?
Yeah, it's up to the board, but
Yeah.
there's no required action.
So maybe we just, yeah, we'll just, no action on that and keep us updated. Unless there's motion, no motion, okay.
So would you like to go through all of the legislation and take public comment, or do you want to go one by one?
Well, it's probably better to go one by one. I know it's a little lengthy. So, public comments on this bill? Not in the room. Moderator, please.
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. And while we give you a chance to do that, does Cal Poly have any public comment?
No public comment.
Thank you. And does the public library have any comment? Oh, we'll come back to Mission VHO. I do see a raised hand requesting. Oh,
No comment. I thought someone was
okay.
coming in, but it wasn't for comment.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have Jennifer Fearing with raising her hand. Jennifer, you should be able to unmute yourself. And you're unmuted. Jennifer, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. This is Jennifer Fang. I actually just have a process question, not related to this item, but I'm struggling on WebEx to know who's speaking within the primary boardroom. I don't know if there's a way for the chair to call on folks before they speak or for folks to say their name. Unfortunately, you're just a very tiny bubble on the screen, and I can't actually tell who's speaking, and that would be super useful to the public. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Sherry. I will do my best to clarify who's speaking. Thank you.
All right, and I see no further requests for comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
Okay.
Agenda item 7.
So the next bill is AB 814. There's not much of an update here other than it was anticipated to be heard on July 10th. It was held and will likely be made into a 2-year bill. So there's not much discussion to have on this bill at this time.
Okay, comments in the room. None online. Public comment. None in the room. Moderator?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened back up the Q&A panel. And if anyone would like to make a comment, they may type comment in the question and answer panel or raise their hand. And do we have any comment from Cal Poly?
No public comment.
Thank you. And from the public library?
None.
Thank you. All right, and I see no public comment from the online attendees as well. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, and I think from here we'll just we'll go through everything and then do public comment at the end.
Okay.
All right, AB 1399, and Dr. Bradbury and Dr. Fulfield may have more to add to this bill, but as the board knows from the main meeting, the board has the opposed unless amended position. It was heard on July 10th, and I was there to testify the board's concern. As I noted in the memos of the board, that the author, Assemblyman Friedman, did accept a lot of the amendments that the board requested. The biggest concern that remains, and that wasn't the amendment that wasn't taken, centered around the limitation on the 14-day prescription and the one renewal prescription, and then having written requirement for an in-person hands-on exam. And when I testified, I shared the concern about it would allow the potential for an animal to go their entire lifespan without seeing a veterinarian. As the board had concerns around that. And CMA also opposed the bill, and they had similar amendments requested. And the past president of CMA spoke about the concerns related to the corporations, Dutch and Chewy being part of them, who were actively lobbying in support of the bill. And prior to the hearing, they had sent out mass emails to veterinarians asking to support the bill. Assemblyman Friedman did go on record and make a point to tell all of the committee members that they were not sponsors of this bill, that they are not driving her decisions of this bill, that it's really being driven by the sponsors, which ASPCA and San Diego Humane Society. So she wanted that to be very clear for the record. This bill did pass, and toward the end, the chair, Senator Ross, asked me about the board's ability to write regulations to add on further define unprofessional conduct. So if there were certain things that were performed in using telemedicine that the board deemed unprofessional conduct, if we could do that through regulations. I never like answering on the spot questions, but I did say that this board has general rulemaking authority to implement our statutes, and so we should be able to do that. But the concern, I did caution him, and I would caution the board, when you look at any kind of regulations that's specifying, getting that specific, if you want to put a list of conditions that may or may not be appropriate using telemedicine. It's why you wouldn't want to do a standard of care in statute or regulation, because it really depends on the animal, it depends on what's going on with the animal, and the circumstances surrounding it, and it could differ. So if you list one condition, and it might be okay, depending on what that animal is doing, and it might not be okay. It really depends. Also, when you start doing very specific lists, you have the risk of, if something else that the board just didn't think of is using telemedicine, they'll point back and say, well, it was okay because it's not on your list, and vice versa. And so it's just really challenging and really to do that. I wouldn't ever recommend to do it that way, but if you wanted to know what the board could. Of course, on my way to my camping trip, I'm thinking about my response, and I started having concerns because generally the board has rulemaking authority to implement statutes. The concern is with this bill, it was very broad and doesn't provide the opportunity for the board to actually limit the use of telemedicine. And so I called Tara and I'm like, hey, I think I messed up. And I said this, and I think that we actually need it to be specified in there to be able to limit telemedicine because the statute itself is there. She agreed, so we have a little bit of concern here, other than that. But right now, because so based on the chair's comments about the desire for the board to do regulations, there is going to be a fiscal impact to that. So I'll be writing a fiscal for appropriations. But if it does go through appropriations and goes to the governor's office, the next step is the board that opposed what the minutes of the student changes into a request to the governor to consider the bill.
I don't have anything additional to add. We've had several meetings, and it has been, I think, constructive, and I really have appreciated the author and the sponsor, both of their participation in conversations, as well as the CBMA, all of the work they've been doing, and with their lobbyists. We appreciate the collaboration there. I see two hands up. We have, go with Ms. Prado and then Dr. Nolan.
Sure. Dr. Nolan had her hand up first, but happy to go first too. Just wanted to say, and thank you. This is Ms. Prado. So I just wanted to have a couple points. So I know that one of the remaining issues is the duration of the prescriptions, and the current bill halves the existing in-person VCPR limit from 1 year to 6 months. And I know that as the board, we're asking for 14 days plus one 14-day renewal. And I can appreciate that. And it also looks like the policy folks over at the Senate and Business and Professions agree why it could be very limiting to arbitrarily limit prescription durations. In the committee's analysis, policy considerations, it says prescription limitations too long or not long enough. This bill sets standards for veterinarians to prescribe medications through telehealth. The limits proposed by this bill may not be within the best standard of care for the animal patient, as shorter or longer periods of time may be necessary, including the need for an in-person examination. The author should continue to work with stakeholders to ensure the telehealth standards do not deviate from current standards of care and practice. And I interpret that to mean and agree that shortening the prescribing period further may not make the most sense for standards of care, which all licensed veterinarians are required to follow regardless of how the VCPR is established. And I really worry that requiring an in-person exam to continue a prescription that is working and needed after 28 days will lead to higher client costs overall. And we should trust that our licensed California veterinarians to utilize their professional judgment regarding prescriptions and patient follow-up. I know we've had so much discussion on this bill, and just as, piggybacking on the resolution that we were just discussing earlier that talks about pet overpopulation and that we know that a veterinary shortage exists, I just truly urge us to continue to look at how this bill is going to help us, right? That we continue to have widespread challenges and harm to animals and pet owners and veterinary professionals because of the shortage that we have. And there was just an article that I read in the Santa Rosa Press Democrat entitled "Veterinary Staffing Crisis Leaves Sonoma County Pet Owners Desperate for Timely Emergency Pet Care." And happy to circulate that for others to read as well. But what we know at this moment is that there's been a bunch of recent amendments that were taken into consideration based on what we have proposed, including the prohibiting of the prescribing of controlled substances or xylazine for situations where the initial VCPR is established via video, strengthening informed consent provisions, and requiring various disclosures and notices to clients. And so, as we know, I want to remind everyone that current law in Idaho, New Jersey, Florida, Oklahoma, Virginia, and Arizona explicitly allow for veterinary client-patient relationships to be established via telemedicine. And Colorado, South Dakota, Maine, Rhode Island, Indiana, Louisiana have flexible rules for establishing a VCPR that do not prohibit the use of veterinary telemedicine. And in light of the progress of this bill and all of the discussion that we've had, I strongly urge us to drop our opposition position and take wholeheartedly supporting this bill.
Thank you so much for the thoughtful comments. I really appreciate that. Dr. Nolan.
I actually had raised my hand earlier because I didn't hear quite a bit of what Jessica said. I don't know if it's the echo, maybe Diana had a better shot at it, but it was hard to hear Jessica. I guess my question was the hearing on July 10th, your overall take home on that, Jessica, was positive or negative?
I think that depends on your perspective. From the board's position, I think it remains an opposed unless amended position because of the concerns that remain. I think it is likely that this bill is going to pass though. So if it does pass through to the governor's office, that opposed unless amended position converts into a request for the governor to veto the bill.
Thank you.
So I just had some other thoughts which go a little bit, they're my personal thoughts, so I certainly haven't necessarily voiced them in our group discussions because it wasn't the board's position, but the 14-day, the prescription our ask of a 14-day limit with the one refill for then having an in-person exam. The discussion with the author where she was talking about her own medications and it was certainly a more human-related medication, it did get me thinking about some of the reasons and one of the few applications of telemedicine that I think is a very valid application, which would be like a behavior consultation and you know, trying to assess an animal that is very aggressive and can't be examined in a house, or rather be examined without being sedated or it would just be too stressful for an animal. So behavioral issues that the animals then, you know, prescribed Prozac, and we are asking them for a requirement of an in-person exam when it really, that there's really no purpose for an in-person exam. So I just wanted to voice that because it came to my mind and I thought, wow, you know, putting this limitation on does sort of negate the one of the few things I can see as a really applicable telemedicine or where telemedicine would be really applicable. So I just wanted to put that out there. Yeah, any other comments from the board? Dr. Solicito?
Yeah, I just wanted to share also part of the conversation that we've had with the group is the fact that we trust our veterinarians to do, you know, to make the right judgment. And having that limitation would kind of restrict others that could potentially make the right decision for the right animal. They're evaluating through telemedicine. So that's why I think there is great value in allowing or removing these restrictions that we're putting up there, because they can technically be barriers for, effective practice of medicine. But that is with a caveat that we know and we have the guardrails for our veterinarians to really do the right thing.
Another thought I had, and I think I agree with you there, one of the biggest concerns I think I have, and I know others have voiced, is the misuse of antimicrobials. And to me, that's almost the main reason this was added. There are, of course, some other medications that we all know would benefit from in-person monitoring, but the misuse of antimicrobials and some of the studies that have shown that the majority of what is prescribed from telemedicine exams are antibiotics, and here we are trying to use the judicious use of antibiotics, and we have a requirement in our state to have continuing education on that, and yet we're potentially allowing people to just prescribe antibiotics long-term without any physical exam and other diagnostics. So it could be reasonable in my mind to be specific about antibiotics, but I know that that's not necessarily going to do anything, but that was another thought I had. Dr. Grant?
Well, I certainly agree that my main concern is over the misuse of antibiotics, certainly. And maybe I'm just from a different world, but it seems like after 14 days, antibiotics are working or they're not. And they keep adding more on, it just causes for more problems, diarrheas, and that sort of drug resistance, whatnot. So I think that's one aspect. And I guess I failed to see where having the animal, even with telemedicine, after 14 days of having them get back in touch with their veterinarian and saying, how are we doing on this? Here's the dog running around, but doesn't have, stains all over its tail back from diarrhea. It doesn't seem like it's that formidable in class. That's what you go to telemedicine. You get the 14-day recheck for nothing, or have a price or something, just to reestablish that communication. And I think most caring veterinarians want to know after 14 days, did it respond or not?
Yeah, Dr. Bradbury here. We're talking about requiring an in-person exam after 14 days, not a follow-up phone call. And I think the idea is that the veterinarians will, practice appropriately and make recommendations for a follow-up call at least. But the amendment we've asked for is an in-person exam. So, okay, I don't see any. Oh, sorry, Christy.
I was trying to be, Christy Plowski here, sorry. I was trying to think through this, and I recognize that this is an area where we are going to have to embrace at least something, because it's a fight that's going to continue, and so we have to keep talking about this, and until we all come to some type of resolution and there's a compromise. And I believe that telemedicine has, like you say, areas where it's necessary behavior, and even in shelter medicine. I mean, shelter medicine is so hard, and we all know that. But when we talk about access to care issues, I don't believe that this is an answer. And I think that that's where we've talked about this repeatedly, and the studies have shown that it is not going to resolve the access to care issue. They cannot afford to do a telemedicine consultation. That's not going to resolve it. So I hope we don't have to continue that, and I believe that we should be able to get past that and So having 14 days of antibiotics and being able to say on that recheck, that's not access to care. That's not, we need to get that 14 days in there. But it's, I mean, this is all over the board. And we're not getting what we want, but we're never going to get what we want. So what's the compromise?
Jessica?
Thanks. I just wanted to make a clarification, and it goes to Ms. Prado's comments that she read from the author's office when it came to the claim that they are reducing the 12 months to 6 months already, so that should be good enough. I think we're kind of doing apples to oranges at that point because the 12 months is specific to controlled substances, and that's already federal law. So to say that you're going from 12 months to 6 months is kind of disingenuous because it's not actually going from 12 months to 6 months because current law is that they had that in-person exam. So those are two different things. It didn't go 12 months to 6 months. It did it totally different. I'm saying the 12 months still exists for controlled substances, but as all of you know, there's a lot of other treatments that are not centered around that controlled substance. But I do think I need to share too from my understanding of the author's perspective, Dr. Grant, to your concern about, well, if the veterinarian continues to use the antimicrobials, and after that 14 days does more antibiotics, and no other standard veterinarian would do that, I think from the author's perspective is at that point, if something were to go wrong, they would file a complaint with the board. We would send it to a subject matter expert. The subject matter expert would say they should not have done this, and then we could take action back. And that's really been the response when we raise concerns about things going wrong, is that they would file a complaint with the board, and the subject matter expert essentially becomes down to the battle of the subject matter expert, which is true. We would have that recourse, but when you have that, enforcement is reactive, not proactive, right? And so you're already requiring harm to be done for us to then take action. So that's the concern. I do want to point out to you the author's office response to the concern of the animal, because Senator Wolf did bring it up. Sorry, I testified that he was unaware that it would allow an animal to potentially go their entire lifespan without getting an in-person exam. He had a concern about that. And the author's office response was, there's a lot of animals that are doing that anyway. Right? There's a lot of animals who aren't getting any services, and so this helps. She admitted that this was not perfect, it does not solve everything, but this is a start. So I just felt like I needed to share those comments for her.
Okay, well, we have the option of doing, just continuing with our continuing status, which is opposed unless amended with the amendment of the 14-day limitation for all drugs. So if we did that, we don't need a motion, or we can change our amendment. We can change how we are standing. So I would need a motion for any of those. If anybody wants to change, yes, Ms. Prado.
Yeah. Would we be able to hear public comment first? Or did we want to, or if not, then I would,
we certainly can do that. Typically, we try and get a motion on the table before we take public comment, but we can certainly do that and then take a public comment after a motion if a motion is made. Oh, wait, Tara.
I was taking a look at the existing BCPR regulation, CCR section 2032.1, and that currently has an exemption from the BCPR requirement for wild animals or animals with an unknown owner. And I'm not seeing that exemption in 1399. I'm seeing that there's the BCPR requirement and that can be established through telehealth, but I'm not seeing any language that authorizes like a veterinarian ongoing to treat a wild animal or animal with no known owner long term. You know, we do have the shelter exemption for limited treatment, but a veterinarian who needs to spay or neuter an animal at a shelter with no owner, without a VCPR, which requires a client, they wouldn't be able to perform those services. So I was wondering if maybe Ms. Prado knew where that language is. I mean, I'm wondering if maybe I'm just missing the language. I know that you're really familiar with this bill, so just wondering if you know where that is.
Let me take a look at it right now again.
So why don't we go ahead and take public comment, and then we'll go on from there.
Hi, Grant Miller from the California Veterinary Medical Association. The CVMA has an opposed unless amended position on AB 1399, and our opposition amendments are very similar to that of this board. To be clear, we're not against the concept of telemedicine, but we, like you, have the same concerns for animal and consumer protection. The First Amendment that we would like to see the author's office consider is, again, a 14-day limitation on medications, similar to that passed in Arizona statute. And our primary concern also is antibiotics. We know from the Ontario Veterinary Medical Association, which is one of the first provinces in North America to have telemedicine instituted, that antibiotics are the #1 most prescribed type of drug via telemedicine. And we also know in California that we are the only state in which veterinarians have a mandatory CE requirement, continuing education requirement, for the judicious use of antibiotics. So we have a concern with that. We also have a concern regarding the ability of telemedicine providers to be able to provide follow-up care to the animals in person in the event that the therapy does not go as planned. We recognize that that is a concern of the sponsors in terms of access. I guess more importantly for this board, I'd like to point our third amendment, which Tara Welsh has begun to touch on. And the fact is that they are taking our cornerstone of veterinary practice, which is CCR 16, section 2032.1, which is our VCPR statute regulation, and they're obliterating it. And they're rewriting a totally different model in statute. And what it's going to do is it's going to do two things. Number one, it's going to create a different VCPR for the state of California. Number two, it's going to bifurcate our VCPR. So part of it will exist in statute, and then the remaining part might end up existing in regulations because they've left it behind. And we've pointed out to them from a policy standpoint that we really need to have our VCPR in one place, and it really needs to mirror and reflect what we have written here for California, because other laws are used for that VCPR. So our hope at this point is that the sponsors of the bill and the author of the bill will be willing to sit down with us and the Veterinary Medical Board to discuss our concerns and to really try to find some resolution on these remaining amendments, because again, our purpose is not to stop telemedicine. Our purpose is to put up some guardrails against companies that will use this as a new model that could put animals and consumers at harm. So that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping that they'll act in the best interest of the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan Baxter, also from the CVMA. Just want to make a very specific point attending to the 14-day limitation to address at least indirectly something that Ms. Prado said. In addition to the clinical attributes of that limitation, keep in mind that one of the additional benefits is to prevent the out-of-state online pharmacies that are very, very directly behind this bill from engaging in prescription-related abuse. Unless there be any doubt about the presence of those companies behind this, you can simply look at the email that Ms. Sieferman referenced from Joe Spector, Dutch's CEO, metaphorically doing cartwheels when this bill passed out of the Senate Business and Professions Committee the other day. So keep that in mind as well as you consider this. Thanks.
There's no more in the room, so moderator, would you please open it up online?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. And while we wait for that, are there any public comments from Cal Poly?
No, there are none.
Thank you. And how about the public library?
from the public library. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have online attendees wanting to comment. Jennifer Fearing, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Good afternoon. This is Jennifer Fearing again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. This time I'm commenting on behalf of the San Diego Humane Society, who, as was mentioned, is joined with the ASPCA in proud co-sponsorship of this legislation. We're also proud of the fact that thus far the bill has received unanimous bipartisan votes, and are grateful that there's so much confidence in licensed California veterinarians and so much concern about the lack of care that so many, up to 1 in 3 animals in California are just simply not able to receive, and the hope that we have that this will address part of it. Of course, it is not the panacea. We also sponsored legislation aimed at securing debt relief for veterinary students who would practice in underserved communities or shelters. We would support establishing a new vet school. There are many, many things we should act with urgency, frankly, are late acting on to try to address what is a crisis for many. You didn't talk through all of them, but quite a few amendments, and I really want to emphasize this. Jessica, you mentioned nearly all of the amendments that the Veterinary Medical Board asked for were taken in the form of authors' amendments, and then an additional set of clarifying and strengthening amendments were taken in the last committee. I regretfully feels it's a bit of a moving target about what it will take to get folks comfortable with this, but there is definitely an earnest and constructive effort underway to establish the kinds of guardrails that would be appropriate, that again maintain and kind of hew to a trust and confidence in licensed California veterinarians to utilize their training, their experience, and their education in an appropriate way that your board will continue to maintain oversight of. With respect to antibiotics that were raised, there are no rule differences for what is the best standards of care and the obligations that veterinarians have to practice within the standards of care. They do not change based on the mode here. And so really want to assure that the ASPCA and San Diego Humane Society expect California veterinarians to only operate within their trusted field of judgment and training to implement this. Lastly, I just want to take issue and concern hearing Jessica, you say you're going to adjust the fiscal. My understanding of the chair's questions of you at the end was to get clarity on whether the board has authority to do further regulations. He didn't direct those, ask for those. That wasn't a motion of the committee. The bill in print is the bill to be addressed, and have appreciated the prior fiscal, given the limited cost to your board to implement it. And so I have strong concerns hearing you say that you're going to raise that based on
15 seconds.
On a comment made by the chair that actually has no bearing on the bill in print and does not establish a requirement on the board. So ask you to think about the animals and people not getting care, that 1 in 3, and ask you to trust your fellow veterinarians.
And I'm sorry, your time is up. Our next request for comment is from Eddie Marshall. Eddie, you should be able to unmute yourself. And
Member of the public, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out,
Marshall, sorry.
in addition to the issues raised by the CVMA with conflicting terminology within our own definitions and regulation, that the development of a VCPR through telemedicine only conflicts with federal regulation and does not meet a federal standard of VCPR. So in those cases, veterinarians who establish a VCPR through telemedicine only would not be able to do any extra label drug use. So they would not be able to prescribe any off-label uses. That includes species, dose, duration, or indication. No minor species would be allowed to be treated by veterinarians through telemedicine only. And I don't think that that approach, so all of the llamas, goats, alpacas, fish, pet birds, none of them will be able to be treated by telemedicine only, because that is a federal regulation, not a state regulation, and not a state authority to do that. And certainly no accredited veterinary actions such as health certificates will be able to be written through telemedicine only. So not only is there sort of internal state issues as raised by CVMA, but we are setting ourselves up to be in conflict with federal authorizations for extra label drug use and the writing of veterinary feed directives. Thank you.
All right, the next request for comment is from Dr. Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right, we'll try that one more time. There we go. You're unmuted.
Human medicine. And during the pandemic, my internist would see me on a regular basis by telemedicine. However, he had me go to LabCorp first and get a blood test. So the medications that I've been on for years, he could still monitor and make sure that they were safe and not having any complications with liver and kidney function. We have the same issue in veterinary medicine, and I believe that the main reason for the restrictions on the days of how often we can fill a prescription and how often can refill it has concerns about long-term treatment with certain chronic conditions. For example, NSAIDs in animals is much different than it is in people. And if we're not monitoring those liver and kidney functions with that product, and I have animals on it for years, but that particular medication, along with antibiotics, need to be watched very closely. And I don't feel it will be when it's handled by the online pharmacies. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. I see no further requests for comments. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, so Ms. Prado.
Hi. Yes, I just wanted to get back to Tara that I didn't see any of that exemption language about the wild animals in the bill in regards to that. And then I also wanted to make a motion to drop our opposition and to I'm like, oh my God, I lost the language, to drop our opposition and to not accept. What's the word I'm looking for? To support.
Support.
Yes, to support. I'm like, to not oppose, to support the bill, given all of the, again, I just want to reiterate that we've really come a long way and all of us are making steps to be able to do what's best for the consumer and their pets. And we all know that there's a huge access to care issue that we're facing, that there's a huge veterinary shortage that we're facing, and that it is believing in our veterinarians to be able to them give to believe in them, right? And this is not to act in a way that we are thinking of the worst case scenario. And, you know, when I was reading over the recordings or the notes of the May 24th meeting, right? It's not to think about what are the worst that could happen in the exceptions. This is to think about what is going to be best for Californians and their pets. And what we know is that, and what we have learned based on the global pandemic that we all faced, is that telemedicine helped. Telemedicine was here to be able to provide access to care. And the authors have come a long way to meet us. Perhaps not giving us everything, but in settlement, and as an attorney, we know that, right? Every good settlement, a great settlement, is that nobody gets everything that they need. That's a settlement that we've all come, and some of the things that we wanted to ask for, we don't get, and some of the things that they wanted to ask for, they don't get. And that what makes a good settlement is that all the parties at the end are receiving the benefit of this. And I just strongly urge us to really reconsider our position and to support this bill and to have faith in our veterinarians and to be able to provide access to care for people and pets in California. So I'd like to make a motion. I guess I reiterate. I'd like to make a motion for us to support AB 1399.
And Ms. Prado, as part of that motion, would you be willing to entertain adding, if amended, to include the exemption for wildlife and unknown animals, so that could, unknown owner, sorry, unknown. Would you be willing to put that in your motion?
Yes, and I will restate my motion if need be to, I'm like, I could do that now. I would like to make a motion to support this bill with the amendments of the wildlife exceptions. Tara, is that sufficient? Please add if needed.
It would be the wildlife and when the owner is unknown.
When, yeah, for wildlife and when the owner is unknown.
I'm looking for a second, and I am not seeing that.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a second. Do we have any other discussion? All right, and public comment, motion, and in the room, public comment online.
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. And while we wait for that, are there any, is there any public comment from Cal Poly?
No, there's not.
Thank you. And the public library? Do we have any comment from Mission Viejo? Okay.
Comment.
Thank you. I do see we have a request for comment from Jennifer Fearing. Jennifer, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Jennifer Fearing, on behalf of San Diego Humane Society. I just wanted to thank Member Prado and the board for this discussion and engagement, and encourage your support of this motion, and just flag that your support, even in this amended position, we would still continue to want to work to address any outstanding issues, but appreciate that support would signal the board's support of moving in this direction of expanding access to care and trusting licensed vets. Thank you.
All right, I see no further requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel? Okay.
Could we read the motion as it now stands, please?
So Ms. Potter, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe your motion was to drop the opposition and instead support the bill if amended to include an amendment that has the exception for wildlife animals and when the owner is unknown.
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get a little bit more clear on this? Because the exemption part's a little fuzzy. Ms. Prado, if you will consider, I think your motion is to support the bill if amended to provide an exemption from the VCPR requirement for treatment of wildlife and animals whose owner is unknown.
Yes.
I agree. Okay. So I think it's, oh yes, Dr. Grant? Okay. It's time for a vote.
Dr. Solcito?
Yes.
Dr. Grant?
Opposed?
Are you voting no? And Dr. Nolan?
No.
Ms. Pulaski?
No.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
No.
The vote is 2 yes and 4 no. That motion died.
Okay, so now it's either another motion or keep it as it is. I would like to propose another motion to remove the opposition and support, if amended, to include a limitation on a 14-day limitation on antimicrobial prescriptions and the exemption from the VCPR for wildlife and unknown owners, as well as keeping our language in 20,
Just utilizing 2032.1 as the VCPR language.
that's it, utilizing 2032.1 as the VCPR language.
I second the motion.
Okay, yeah, now we, comments from the board.
Clarification on the motion. Item 1 is a 14-day limitation on antimicrobial prescriptions. Do you mean adding a limitation in the practice of telehealth?
So I think the same language that we had for any prescription and add in just inserting antimicrobial prescriptions.
So you're referring to the requirement that after the 14 days, they'd have to have that in-person exam for the 14 days and then the renewal one?
Yes.
And then they would have to have the 14-day exam. In person.
In person.
So when the prescription is initiated through telehealth, after 14 days, there would have to be an in-person exam to renew the prescription.
Yes. Yes, that's a little bit different because it's not the refill of 14 days, but I think that would be good.
Just want to be clear. We're putting a restriction of 14 days, requiring an in-person recheck only for antimicrobial. Okay.
Ms. Pulowski?
Christy Pulowski here. I just want to ask the question because this is in May, that you guys had this whole discussion about oppose versus support. And that they didn't have to, but we're not getting anywhere with oppose either.
I don't think we've gotten quite far with
yeah,
those.
so-
So, I mean, I feel like the authors have been working with us and,
Right.
and really have the best interest of the consumers, and I think are still going to,
Listen.
well, I mean, whether they listen or not, I don't know that they'll listen, I just don't know that they'll act on it, but at this point, to me, I think they've acquiesced to a lot of our asks, and I, in the spirit of Ms. Prado's conversation,
I agree with you.
That's where I've changed.
No, and I agree, that's why I'm asking the difference, so.
I don't see in the 2032.1 about having to have a 14-day exam.
That's not in there.
Yeah.
We're adding that. That's what this is a different, so 2032.1 is the current, the current VCPR language, and what Dr. Miller pointed out was that the way that everything is, the language in the bill really would change all of that, and it would affect lots of other regulations and regulations that we utilize. And so if we could instead utilize the language that we already have, it would be more uniform and make the most sense. So that's why I added that as an amendment. The 14-day requirement after 14 days, requiring an in-person exam for refill of antimicrobials is separate from that.
Sorry, I just need clarification now, because I thought that we were talking about using the regulation language specific to the exemption and copying and putting that in here, but are you proposing to take the entirety of that regulation and putting it in here, or just that exception?
I think actually it's the entirety after the discussion, which would include that exemption, except for the in-person exam, right? Dr. Miller? Yeah, so public comment.
It gets a little complicated because the language that we would need would have to be synthesized with what they're trying to do, and the CVMA provided that language to them in our July 5th memo to the author. It was our third requested amendment. I recognize that you don't have that in front of you, but that language actually involved language that was written by Ms. Welsh that is a working version of 2032.1 that was pursuant to work done in the MDC. So it's essentially 2032.1, but what we did is we put in there that a VCPR could be established either by in-person examination or by synchronous telehealth or by medically appropriate and timely visits to the premises where the animals are kept. We put that in. We removed section F, which is our current telemedicine section, and then we synthesized the 6-month telemedicine renewal, the 6-month limitation on telemedicine-based prescriptions with the 12-month in-person-based limitation on prescriptions. So it requires a lot of smithing to get this done, which is why we are asking the sponsors to please let us have a meeting with them to discuss this, because there are parts of this bill that will cause huge problems in our Practice Act if not synthesized correctly, but they are of no consequence to them as the author. They will not change what they want to do, but it will avoid us having to have regulatory nightmares for 10 years to come if we can just get this language right. So I recognize for the purpose of a supportive amended position, that's very hard for you to now encapsulate, but the concept is that the language would be based more on 2032.1 than it is on the national model that they chose to incorporate in. I'd also like to point out that if 2032.1 is incorporated in the way that we want, you don't need to call out a specific exemption for wildlife and unowned animals because that's already in 2032.1. So really, hey, authors and sponsors, if you're listening, time for us to all have a meeting as stakeholders and let us get in the room and talk to you about how this language would need to look in order to make it work with our Practice Act. Thank you.
A point of order, is it possible to table the motion until we see a rewritten draft? Would that make it clear for everybody?
Do you remember what I'm talking about with that 2032.1 language?
So we could.
It doesn't really matter what I remember because they don't have any language before.
Right.
So yes, you could table the support as amended motion and then do nothing because right now you already have an opposed unless amended position, and since there's ongoing conversations about this, perhaps it may not, if the board members believe maybe it's not a good time to change position and suggest additional amendments when CVMA has already offered some amendments that could resolve the concerns that you've discussed today.
Need the motion to table it?
No, I don't think you just pull the motion back. Alternatively, you could designate authority to the executive committee to either participate in a stakeholder meeting to work on amendments to resolve the board's concerns as discussed today. You can do that. And then otherwise, the executive committee would just have to sit on the current position, which is opposed unless amended.
So could we table it until tomorrow and look at these tonight? Is that what you were thinking? That's what I mean.
I'd just like to kind of see it.
Yeah. Can we table it until tomorrow and then revisit it? And that way, if we could get that email to us, and then you're not voting on something. Yeah. So let's do that. Since we had additional public comment in the room, let's open it up to public comment online.
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand while we wait for that. Is there any public comment from Cal Poly?
But I apologize, but I'm getting a little confused. I know we're talking about the 14-day limitation on antibiotics or antimicrobials only, but is that insinuating that then other drugs, including NSAIDs, will be a 30-day or it goes to 6 months? I'm a little lost. Can I get a little clarification on that?
So it would, any other drug would not be included. And I guess in my mind, or the way that I felt comfortable doing that is that I've had patients who didn't have much money at all who would need a medication that I would recommend a physical exam in 2 to 4 weeks and lab work, but they couldn't afford to do that. And I would write that in the record and tell them about the side effects of that medication and what to watch for. And I would have a follow-up phone call checking on them. So I think that for other drugs, while there are some gold standard ideal things, it is, I still think, within the veterinarian's purview. I think the antimicrobials, for me, just to explain where I'm thinking, Dr. Nolan, antimicrobials would align with our global concern for the loss of antimicrobials due to resistance and the overuse of them, the state and our stance regarding antimicrobial overuse and prescriptions. So, and the information we have on what the most prescribed drug has been in places that are using telemedicine, and that is antibiotics. So I felt like if we were to specify that, we may actually have a chance of having that be accepted because it protects the world and is a little bit more specific. And because with other drugs, there are some, like, for example, the Prozac and the behavior case, that if we had that limitation, then they would need to come in and have an exam, et cetera. So anyway,
Okay,
that's a
so
long answer to your question.
Yeah, let me go back to my question. In the current rendition of the bill, it would be any other drugs for 6 months or a year or 30 days. That's what's confusing me. I think that I read in the bill it's 6 months. Is that right? And we're asking for an
the
exemption
current rendition of the bill is that another exam via telemedicine would be required within 6 months to get a refill prescription.
Hey, I'm just trying to make sure I'm on the current rendition of the bill.
All right, and do we have any public comment from the public library? Okay, we have a request for public comment online, and that's Bonnie Lutz. Bonnie, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go, you're unmuted, Bonnie.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to comment on what Dr. Miller said and say that due to the fact that we assist veterinarians with defending themselves against potential violations of the regulations, that we do what Dr. Miller has suggested and make every effort to incorporate 2032.1 into this legislation, because otherwise, I agree with him completely. This is going to be a total nightmare because the veterinarians won't understand what they're supposed to follow. We won't understand as defense attorneys, how we're supposed to defend, and it'd just be a nightmare. So that's been a problem that I've had all along, was there seems to be just like this disconnect where we're just going to sort of forget about 2032.1, which we can't do. So I really strongly recommend that you do what Dr. Miller suggested and try to get the authors of the bill to incorporate 2032.1. And that would solve your problem with what was brought up as far as animals without owners and wild animals. That would solve the problem because you'd be incorporating that language. Thank you.
All right, I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we are tabling that for revisiting tomorrow. We'll probably do that first thing. We're going to take a 10-minute break and be back at 3:15. Hey, I did it this time. I waited. Okay, we're back, and I see Ms. Prado. Hello, hi, Dr. Nolan. Okay, we are going to skip to 669, the discussion on 669, which is agenda item 787. Yeah.
All right, so this is SB 669, this is the Cortese bill, dealing with veterinarians and the VCPR. And just a reminder that this is allowing the RBT to act as the agent to do the VCPR. And the main concern that remains in the bill is the conflict that Tara had brought up, that you have to have the requirements of the veterinarian is the one who is writing the prescriptions, and the board had requested, in order to address that concern, an amendment that requires the veterinarian to review documentation prior to allowing the RBT to administer the medication. And that was not accepted by the author's office, and they do not agree with the interpretation, and was not open to accepting that amendment. So the board's position remains opposed unless amended, and like I said before, if the current position doesn't change and that amendment is not included, then that then converts to a request for the governor to veto.
Okay, any questions? Nobody here? Sorry. Don't see any hands up there. So does anybody want to change our position? I don't see anybody jumping up for that. Okay, so public comment?
Thank you. Grant Miller, California Veterinary Medical Association. The CVMA has a support position on SB 669, but I'd like to report that we have made a couple of requests of the author's office. Despite that position, one of the requests is to ask the bill to be amended to remove the record-keeping requirement for RVTs. We figured out in a recent meeting that if the statutory record-keeping requirement for RVTs remains in place and our record-keeping regulations change, we will now have two separate record-keeping requirements for the state of California, which will cause confusion. And we felt that that was a poor policy standpoint. And so we appealed to the author's office to just strike the record-keeping requirement and to replace it with a simple statement along the lines of records shall be kept in accordance with current laws and regulations, something generic enough to point back to this board as the authority so that we have one record-keeping requirement. I think all medical veterinary licensees know that record-keeping requirement is incumbent upon veterinarians. And so if they're overseeing somebody like a technician in doing something, the record-keeping requirement still falls on the veterinarian. And so we didn't want there to be ambiguity there or to have two separate requirements, and so we're asking that that be struck. As of today, we have not seen those amendments in the bill, but the author's office did receive that request from us, and so we're hoping that we'll get a response from them soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Seems like that was, Dr. Bradbury, it seems like that would go along with their what they're trying to achieve. So hopefully they'll. Ms. Ehrlich.
Hi, Nancy Ehrlich with the California RVT Association. I think it's on now, yes. Okay. We have a problem with requiring the RVT to inform the client either in writing or verbally that they are under the supervision of a particular veterinarian's name and license number for a number of reasons. The primary reason that we don't like this is that it's offensive. It implies that somehow RVTs are not qualified to do this, and therefore you need to know who's supervising me. Second is that it's silly because the client is not going to remember the veterinarian's license number. And third, it's unnecessary because the RVT, as of January 1st, has to wear a name tag with the fact that they're an RVT and their license number on them in 18-point type so that the client will know exactly who is dealing with them. And if they have a problem with how the RVT is administering the vaccine or the prescriptions or whatever, they can complain about the RVT, which is what is appropriate. And if they complain to the Veterinary Medical Board about the RVT, then during the board's review of the case, they will find out who was the supervising veterinarian. So it makes no sense to me to make the RVTs look like they're not quite competent to be doing what they're doing, at the same time doing nothing that's going to benefit anybody. So I would hope that you would stop. It's the board that's forcing this. I mean, we had asked that, okay, if you have to have the client informed about this stuff, then have the receptionist hand them a sheet of paper when they're checking in, and they can sign the piece of paper, it becomes part of the patient's record. Why are you making the RVT do this? The RVT does not do other administrative jobs. It's the job of the office staff. And I strongly encourage you to stop pushing this amendment so that we can do this the way it's done in every other medical setting. I would ask, has anybody here ever walked into a medical setting and had someone say, oh, by the way, I'm being supervised by so-and-so whose license number is XYZ? I mean, all my 76 years, it's never happened to me. I presume it's never happened to any of you, too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, nobody else in the room. Moderator, can you open it up to our online community?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or you may simply raise your hand. And while you do that, I'll check. Do we have any public comment from Cal Poly?
No public comment.
Thank you. And do we have any comment from our public library?
None.
Thank you. All right, and I see no public comment from the online attendees as well. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and so, sorry, before you comment, Sarah?
Just a couple comments about to address public comment. I believe your regulations counsel, Christy Shields, raised the issue about the medical records potential conflict between this bill and the regulation. So thank you, Christy. I did want to note that part of the record keeping, if that included the documentation, we were, okay, good. Good, because there was a documentation that we asked for because part of allowing an RVT to step in as the agent of the veterinarian was so that the RVT would document the condition of the animal, and then the veterinarian would review the documentation because they need something to look at to prescribe the medication. That's the law. So we would, just want to make sure that documentation of the animal's condition was maintained because we are requesting an amendment to address the lack of veterinarian prescription issue that's currently in the bill, because right now, effectively, not only is the RVT serving as the agent of the veterinarian for purposes of the examination, and then establishing the BCPR. But the RVT effectively is also prescribing medication, the vaccination itself, which we think is problematic under both federal and state law. Second, I really want to explain the client disclosure issue. Ms. Ehrlich has expressed concern with, because the BCPR is in effect a contract between the veterinarian and the client. And so now that the veterinarian is no longer creating this direct contract with the client, but the RVT is, it's not about saying this RVT is incompetent, they have to be supervised. It's about telling the client the RVT is an agent of the veterinarian for purposes of establishing this contract to treat the animal. We require agency notification and many other occupations, so that especially when you've got, under this bill, an RVT would go to a location, service many animals, and a veterinarian would only be on call if there was a problem. So the clients would have absolutely no idea with which veterinarian they were creating this BCPR contract to treat the animal. So that's what the disclosure request is about, so that the consumer knows who is the veterinarian with whom they created this BCPR contract. You know, I don't know that we would disagree with some form of written documentation provided by the front desk, but if there's some way, we need to alert the client who they've created this contract with. It's not the RVT, it's the veterinarian. That's all.
Thank you. Christy Pulowski. And Nancy, I understand where you're coming from, and I agree that it's hard and it's a mind shift. But I think that there are a couple ways of looking at this. And one is that we need to change the way we look at it and be respectful that we are given a responsibility greater than no other, and that we're getting this ability to act as an agent. And we have to accept that responsibility and be grateful for it and say, we're going to present that with confidence to the client and be proud that we get to present that to the client and say that to the client, because no one else gets to be able to do that. There are many administrative duties that an RVT has to do on a regular basis, and nowadays it's all electronic. It's very electronic in a room when RVTs and VAs are doing things. They're signing things constantly on an iPad or a tablet, and so this is just one more of those administrative, if you want to call them, duties that the technical staff has to do, that an RVT has to do. And I think it's something that we should embrace, and we should be thankful that we get the opportunity to do it. Okay, Dr. Grant?
Yeah, I personally went and had a couple of biopsies and a nodule removed by a lay person who's assisted the doctor, and all they did at the desk was hand me some paper to sign and release them. It wasn't a big problem. I didn't think it was. I don't believe it insulted anybody yet. To the person that be a little bit of a surgeon myself, I know that, you know, it's not necessarily your DVM that makes you a good surgeon, your hands and everything else.
Great. So I think, can I comment? Sure. We'll try and limit it to the 3 minutes. Okay, thank you.
I don't believe that it's offensive for the client to be informed that the RVT is being supervised. What's offensive is forcing the RVT to be the one to tell the client. And if we can have them sign a form at the reception desk, that would, I think, satisfy the board's desire that the client is informed. And it would satisfy our desire that not putting the RVT in the position of saying, I need to be supervised by so-and-so in order to do this.
Okay, I think that means we have to open up public comment online.
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. And as you do that, do we have any comment from Cal Poly?
No, we don't.
Thank you. And how about Mission Viejo?
No.
Thank you. And I do not see any comment from our online attendees. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, yes, please. Okay, well, I don't see any motions, so I think we are ready to move on. And we are going to go back to 7A4.
Great, not much update here. This is SB 372 regarding the name agenda changes that are on the DCA's website. The bill was amended to incorporate all of the DCA requested amendments, and so staff has no more concerns. The board did not take a position on this bill, so I think we can move on to the next one. SB 373, the board took a support if amended position. This is related to the disclosure of the full address of record that's identified in Business and Professional Code 27. The board has requested that the Veterinary Medical Board licensees be included. And on June 21st, the bill was amended to include the board's licensees. So, you could change the position to support, since it's now doing what the board requested.
Okay, I move to support. I second. Any other discussion? No, any comments in the room? Seeing none, moderator, would you please open it up?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. If you've called in, you can press *3 to raise your hand. While you do that, any comment from Cal Poly?
No public comment.
Thank you. And from the public library, any comment?
Public comment, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I see no requests for comment. No requests for comment from online. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
For a vote?
Dr. Solcito?
Yes.
Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Ms. Polanski?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes. Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, members, that takes us to SB 544. This is, as you know, would amend existing law that would allow the board to continue doing teleconferencing, which is similar to what we were doing in COVID, without having to publicly notice the meeting locations. The board did have a support position. However, I did want to provide an update that I was provided by DCA on this bill. These amendments are not published yet. I went on today and they're not there. But however, when the bill was heard in Assembly Government Operations Organization Committee, they heard it, and the author did accept a couple of amendments that I just wanted to bring to your attention. Again, this is not published yet, but the author did accept them. Number one, the amendment was amend the bill to include a sunset date of January 1, 2026. This would allow for further analysis of the implementation and overall impact of this in previous badly keen waivers. The sunset date would also dovetail with the January 1st, 2026 sunset date as provided for in AB 2449 that granted Ralph M. Brown Act exemption to allow members of local legislative bodies to use teleconferencing under specified conditions. However, the next amendment is more of a concern, I believe, and so the second amendment was to amend the bill to provide that a majority of the members, which is a quorum of the state body, would need to be present at one physical location for a minimum of 50% of the meetings of the state body for each year. And They say this will provide state bodies with the flexibility they need to continue conducting business in a teleconferencing environment while providing the public with the opportunity to participate in person and interact directly with members at designated meetings. The concern that I and other executive officers have raised is that when you require a quorum of the state body to be at the physical location, you essentially negate any cost savings that the still otherwise would bring. So that's a concern. And so another potential position the board could take is a support if amended and request that be removed and share the fact that essentially undoes any of the savings that we would be doing. The other potential amendments that the board could consider is, again, this bill doesn't have an urgency clause to it, which means it won't take effect if it passes until January 1. And so if we want it passed upon the governor's signature, we would request that there's an urgency clause, not say if it's passed either before the next board meeting or if other boards have meetings after October, when the governor signs it, they'd be able to immediately take advantage of it. But
I move to support if amended by removing the quorum clause and adding an urgency clause. I know that's probably not specific enough for Tara, but she can edit as needed.
I'll second that. Okay, the discussion and public comment in the room. Moderator, would you please open it up online?
Thank you, Madam President. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please use the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen or simply raise your hand. And while we wait for that, do we have any comment from Cal Poly?
No public comment.
Thank you. Any comment from the public library?
Public comment.
Thank you. And I see no comment from the online attendees. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
Okay, it's closed.
Dr. Solcito?
Yes.
Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Ms. Pulowski?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, so the next ones are just really quick updates, and then maybe take public comment once all of them are done. But you have SB 887. This was a committee bill. No updates. The bill is continuously going through. This does have a support position from the board. This is including amendments that the board had requested in their omni bill. The other board monitor legislation is really just as an FYI, but I did want to share that the bill that the board took a support position on, which was AB 1237, student financial aid, that was held under submission in appropriations, and so did not make it out. It has the potential to be turned into a 2-year bill, but I imagine because of the fiscal tied to it, that it was not successful this session. With that, if there's any questions, move on.
No questions from the board. Any public comment? Seeing none, moderator, please.
Thank you, Madam
Okay,
President.
to be clear, we're taking public comment on agenda item 7A4, which is SB 372, SB 887, and B 1 through 5.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. And while you do that, is there any public comment from Cal Poly?
No public comment.
Thank you. And the public library?
No public comment.
Thank you. And I see no public comment from WebEx, so shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we are now on agenda item 8, update discussion and possible action on pending regulations.
Good morning, I'm Jeff Olguin. I'm the lead administrative analyst for the board, and I also do the regulations as well. So today, currently, we have 6 pending regulations that are in the process through various initial phases. I'm glad to know that the Uniform Standards Package is currently with the Reg Council in their review, and that package essentially adopts the substance abuse standards required by DCA with minor modifications that are applicable to the Veterinary Medical Board. And so that one is expected to be pretty much finished up in the near future with the Reg Council, with their review. Good news is on Monday for the RVT education package, we did get approval from the Reg Council and it has been pushed off to the DCA director. So that one is getting pushed through the process next as well. And that regulation council, or package, I'm sorry, allowed school programs to extend their education programs beyond the 20 semester units to make a further developed program. It also eliminated the 5-year requirement for RVTs to complete their education within that time period, as well as eliminating the 24-month period for the RVTs. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt right in between, but on your status of the regulations, sort of the flow chart or chart, it has it that it's been submitted to agency.
Yes, for the RVT education. Yeah, it got submitted on Monday.
Oh,
so
okay. It passed out of the DCA director. Got it.
Yeah. So when this was published, it hadn't got to that point yet. So we just got notification on Monday. So that one's looking like that will be pretty much pushed forward as well. For the next package, we have the minimum standards for veterinary premises. That is currently with budgets for their review to see how that impacts the various budget aspects for Californians as well as the profession. And that one takes in consideration for the various premise types in California, including the fixed premise types for large and small animals, mobile veterinary premises, and the vaccination veterinary premises as well. And so the next package that is in the process here is the RVT vaccination administration. That package is currently with budgets on the June 16th, and it's currently with Reg Councils for review. But it should be noted that the board is still monitoring SB 669, and so that might result in that package being pulled if that bill is approved. So right now we're assuming that that bill will not be approved. We're going to push forward with it as is, but if it does get approved, that package will be pulled back. Just FYI. And the next package we have after that is the veterinary graduate student exemption. That one clarifies that veterinarian students in their junior and senior years can do RVT tasks, as well as graduates from a AVMA veterinarian school can become RVTs if they choose to. They will be eligible through that pathway. That package is currently now with the board's Reg Council, and they're indicating that there might be some issues based on our current licensure process. So right now, based on CCR 2010, we require that they apply with us first before they can take the VT&E. And so that has been identified as an issue because now RVTs, once they get their education, they can apply directly with the AAVSB to take the VT&E. So we would need to review that reg as well. And that's something that we will be providing to you guys in the future, reviewing those regs. So right now that package is on temporary hold until we review the regulations for you guys. And the last package, which is the drug compounding package. That package will be coming back to you guys in October because we have not received any legislative proposals that have approved that the veterinary assistants or the VACSP holders, giving them permission to provide the same type of services as RVT. So that package will be coming back to you in October. And if you guys have any questions at this point, I'll be happy to answer.
I don't see any questions from board members. Thank you so much for your presentation. Is there any public comment in the room? None in the room. Moderator?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or simply raise your hand. And can we check with the Cal Poly? Do we have any public comment there?
No, we don't.
Thank you. And do we have any public comment from the public library?
Not.
Thank you. All right, I see no public comment from WebEx as well. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right, so next up is agenda item 9, our student liaison reports. And we will start with Molly Masterson. I'm not sure if she is present at the moment, so maybe we'll move forward to Alexandra Klumpke from Western.
Everyone, can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great. I'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today to share my report. I wanted to start with, to begin the summer, Western U held its commencement ceremony for the class of 2023, and we celebrated just over 100 new veterinarians officially joining the profession. So we're very excited about that. At the event, the school welcomed keynote speaker Dr. Liz Mossop, the provost and senior vice chancellor of the University of Lincoln in Lincoln, England, and then several fellow student speakers, all of whom spent a great deal of time reflecting on the graduates' resilience through the program despite traversing the curriculum through the main midst of the recent pandemic. Subsequently, the Western U CVM is really excited to welcome the class of 2027 next month. The administrative team interviewed a total of 659 applicants for the class of 2027, ultimately sending out approximately 145 acceptance letters and placing an additional 150 potential students on the wait list. All in all, the College of Vet Med looks forward to welcoming just over 100 new students to the campus for the 2023 to 2024 academic year. Following, Western U is also continuing its unwavering commitment to community outreach and engagement. First off, in last May, the students, staff, and faculty actually participated in the 13th annual Mount San Antonio College Health Professions Conference in Walnut, California. And this annual event is actually one of the largest and most comprehensive conferences of its kind in the US. It was organized by Mount SAC's very own Dr. Cameron Rexach, and offered high school students and college students and their families the opportunity to learn more about careers in the health professions realm. And the team actually shared a detailed look into the veterinary profession specifically. This year, the theme of the event was Empowering Tomorrow's Health Professionals Today. You are the future of medicine. And the Western U CVM team operated an informational booth and spoke with the visitors about our program specifically, the curriculum, and the admissions process to the College of Vet Med. They also took the opportunity to promote the CVM's many open faculty positions. And then students, through various workshops, actually represented all the classes and shared their experiences and advice surrounding career paths in veterinary clinical medicine and research, along with the other health professionals. They also participated in a One Health panel discussion at the event. Secondly, and more recently, the Western U CVM participated in a Playing is Learning major book drive organized to help bring books to young readers in the city of Pomona. A few of the students and several of the faculty members took part in the day's activities, where they provided information and guided hands-on activities about veterinary medicine, such as stuffed animal physicals, which were really well received by the children. The city of Pomona actually sponsored the event that targeted the young children, many of whom were below the age of 5, and the book donation boxes were placed throughout the Western U campus and collected a great many lightly used and new books for children. Third, the Southern California Veterinary Medical Association is continuing its work with the Downtown Dog Rescue, hosting preventative veterinary care clinics for underserved pet owners in the Los Angeles area. And during these events, the predominantly canine and feline patients are receiving wellness care services in a tent station style format, where there's also a mobile spay and neuter service on site as well. This time last year, the clinic was seeing an average of 200 appointments during each of the clinics, but more recently, we're really excited that that number has been increasing, and they're actually providing services to about 300 pets per clinic per month. And the Western students, alumni from our program, and faculty members are actually a great proportion of the volunteers at these events, so we're really proud of that. In addition, Western U is also taking steps to spotlight the One Health concerns and collaboration beyond the campus. So with the support of Dr. Brad Henson, Western U Interim Vice President for Research and Biotechnology, a broad-based One Health meeting was actually held this last May. The goal of that meeting was to see if Western U could create a One Health research and biosurveillance collaboration with Los Angeles County Health, San Diego County Health, Long Beach County Health Departments. And one of our very esteemed faculty members, Dr. Tracy McNamara, actually helped organize the meeting and attracted several fellow CVM faculty members to serve as representatives from Western U. Colleagues from beyond the campus were also in attendance, and the overarching goal of the meeting was really to figure out who is doing what right now in the realm of One Health, discuss data sharing, and identify projects for which we can apply for funding. They did find one potential funding source that was recorded as it included resources included in SB 1029, sponsored by Senator Melissa Hurtado, from the One Health program, Zoonotic Diseases, and that was signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom late last year. So they have a long way to go, but they're excited to begin that journey. There are a couple recent kudos that we wanted to share with you all. The 3 College of Vet Med professors actually provided a look into Western's innovative interprofessional practice and education program, or the IPE program. This was shared and highlighted in a recent issue in a national journal. The program is really about preparing veterinary students for interprofessional and systems-based practice. It's headed by our interim dean, Dr. John Texas. And this was published in the June 1st edition of the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association, or JAVMA. The article really detailed how the IPE program helps prepare the students for the challenges that exist in modern veterinary medicine. And the goal is really to help the students work and learn together so that you can combine the various disciplines in which the students will leave the program better prepared to provide services to clients in today's very rapidly evolving healthcare environment. And then following, additionally, our former dean, Dr. Philip Nelson, and our fellow esteemed faculty member, Dr. Peter Weinstein, were actually celebrated and recently honored for their exemplary service and commitment to veterinary medicine through both professional employment and volunteerism. Dr. Nelson, who stepped down not too long ago in 2022, after 15 years as the dean at Western U, received the AVMA's Meritus Service Award, and he received that award at the organization's annual convention in Denver this year. This award actually follows another recent honor that Dr. Nelson was gifted from the CVMA, where he was presented the CVMA's Outstanding Service Award. And that was presented to him during the annual Pacific Veterinary Conference, or PACVET, in the nearby city of Long Beach down here. His colleague, Dr. Weinstein, was also celebrated by the CVMA at PACVET, where he received the CVMA's Lifetime Achievement Award. So we were very excited for the two of them to be celebrated. Last but not least, I'm unfortunately sad to share that our entire College of Veterinary Medicine community is mourning the recent loss of a Western U CVM icon, Dr. Gary R. Johnson, who unfortunately passed away at the age of 79 following a brief illness. Dr. Johnson wasn't just a founding member at the College of Veterinary Medicine at Western U, but he was actually the college's very first faculty member, where he was hired alongside with his wife, Dr. Shirley Johnson, and who assumed the role of founding dean. The couple actually began their work at Western in late 1990, where they laid the foundation for the first College of Veterinary Medicine class in the fall of 2001. And Dr. Johnson's fingerprints are very much still felt amongst the students and faculty, given his involvement in the CVM curriculum some 20 years later. He actually authored many of our problem-based learning cases that the students use to work through as the curriculum, especially in the first 2 years of their education. Or he added extra radiology content, being that that was his specialty. He's played such an integral part in our program's mission, and the administration very much accounts a great deal of their success to his efforts. So he is very warmly remembered amongst the faculty, students, and staff. When most are asked, how to describe him, everyone is in agreement as describing him as one of the most genuine and kind to all, and they thank him for his heartfelt care for the students and their education. So we're very sad to have lost him, but I wanted to highlight my appreciation. And that is all I have to share.
Thank you so much. It sounds like a lot is going on at your the amount of animals in your the dog outreach program, downtown dog. She said downtown dog. That's great. That's great. There's a lot going on down there, and and it's really fun to hear how much is happening at university. So thank you so much for bringing this to us, and I'm sorry for your loss of Dr. Johnson. Sounds like a quite a large presence when he was here, and it sounds like he's going to be missed. So is there any questions? Yeah.
Just wondering, did all the seniors get jobs?
Everyone that I have spoken to has found what they're looking for, either going straight into practice or exploring internship opportunities or mentorship programs. I don't think anyone has been left without an option, because you practically, there's so many opportunities for each graduate. So I think everybody's found a spot.
Good news for the parents.
Okay, is there any public comments in the room? Moderator, would you open it up online, please?
Thank you, Madam President. I am opening up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, or simply raise your hand. And while we give you a moment, do we have any public comment in Cal Poly?
No public comment.
Thank you. And do we have any public comment at the public library?
No public comment.
Thank you. And I am seeing no public comment in WebEx as well. Shall I close the question and answer panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask you, do you go by Alexandra? Or Alex or Shura or?
Oh, thank you for asking. I typically go by Allie.
Allie? Or Alex? Allie, okay. Allie, okay, I'm sorry, but I haven't been using that. I will call you by your preferred name. So thank you again. Let's see, moderator, will you look and see? Sorry. Holly is on the line. Is she? She's not. Okay. So I think we'll move forward. And I guess if she comes back online, we can have her report. Yeah, okay, so we are, I believe that's me. Is the president's report. I used to have like stacks of paper, and I chose not to print things out, and I maybe am yeah. It's just hard, like I'm moving these between WebEx and yeah, it's okay though. It's okay. Okay, well, it has been a busy few months, and but very interesting, and I have been really proud to be your president, and so thank you for allowing me to participate in some of these things that we've been involved in legislatively. I've found that to be very interesting. So after the board meeting, immediately following the board meeting, I went with Ms. Bowler and Jessica to the Assembly B&P hearing on AB 14. Kathy presented there, and we were there for support in early May. Pursuant to the board's wishes, our executive team met with authors and aides involved in AB 1399 to discuss the concerns and suggestions for amendments. CDMA and ABMA were also involved in those meetings. In May 16th, we, I believe, met with the sponsors about 669. On May 22nd, I had a phone conversation with Hank Zeitlin, who was the interim director, I believe, of HISA, to talk about, which is the horse boy, I should have that written down. Horse Integrity and Safety Act. Thank you. It's a federal act that went into effect last year, but some of the drug, the drug requirements and monitoring began actually on May 22nd when I had the meeting. But I reached out to them to sort of start a conversation to try and understand the act better, and also to see how we can align with them to achieve their goals. In the state, we don't have a lot of we won't have a lot of involvement, but I think if there are veterinarians that are also involved in racing, that we might be involving them if there's issues. We also had our special board meeting, which most of you were at, and then on May 25th, I had the subject matter expert training, which was one of my MDC roles, which went very well, and we'll get an update during enforcement on that. Had a CDFA blood bank meeting, which was also one of my MDC roles. Dr. Waterhouse joined me. That was the first time she joined our meetings, which was great. Then in early June, we had a stakeholder meeting for AB 814 and AB 1399. It was an opposition stakeholder meeting with the Senate Business Committee consultants, and that was the CVMA, AVMA, and our executive team, where we all kind of had a quick time to speak, but I did feel like that was a useful meeting. June 9th, Jessica and I participated virtually with the Board of Governors meeting for the CVMA, which also I think went well. We had another meeting with the Senate BMP, and then had the board, Dr. Grant and I were involved in the BMOT, or Board Member Orientation Training, which I found much more useful the second time around, because I already knew a lot of what was going on, and then it was like, oh, okay, I actually really enjoyed it, and I again found it very helpful, and I think we came up with a couple of extra things that came out of that, including direct deposits for some of our payments, which, you know, there's little pearls from everything that we do. And then I believe we had a meeting with Assemblymember Friedman about AB 1399 on June 27th, which also I felt like went well. It turned out I was the only one that ended up speaking at that, but the CVMA and the AVMA also were present, and the executive team was there. And then on 6/28, I was happy to congratulate our newest board member, welcome her to the group, and that is my report of my activities as your president. Any questions? None. Go back up WebEx. None there. Okay, any public comment? All right, moderator, would you open up to public comment online, please?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or simply raise your hand. And while we wait for that, are there any public comments from Cal Poly?
No public comment, but thank you for all your hard work, Christina.
Oh, thank you.
And any public comment from the public library?
No public comment from the library.
Thank you. All right, I am not seeing any public comment from WebEx. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Please.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so next up, and I think the last item of the day. We get our 12-day, has it been 12 days since you've taken
barely.
I'm not sure that it's even fair to us to do this, but since you've been on MVP for a long time, we're
I have a
going
little
to.
bit. I mean, I just have one thing, but I mean, I think Jessica did our RVT report, so she fought it for us. So I will just point out that AAVSB has announced their scholarship recipients, and I think that the summer of 2023 VTNA scholarship awards, and these are scholarship awards that, let me go to what they do. So they offer 2 awards for the VTNE candidates, each awarded annually. They are celebrating diversity awards to those who not only put in the hard work, but also represent outstanding leadership and academic achievement, and those who foster, cultivate, and continuously preserve a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they are presented by the Veterinary Technology Nursing Program faculty to one graduating student who fosters, cultivates, and preserves a culture of leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion, and treats everyone with respect and dignity. So it is presented to one student from every AVMA, CVTA, or CVMA, which is the Canadian accredited program, or accredited veterinary technology nursing program, is expected to graduate during the calendar year in which the award is being given. So it's selected by the school's award selection committee based on their commitment to leadership, and they receive a prepaid voucher to the VTNE. So I am certain that any of you have looked at that price of that VTNE, know that it would be very much appreciated. And the deadline for the annual submission is September 1st of the calendar year, and there's no application. So it's the VTNE Celebrating Diversity Award. So they had two recipients for the summer of 2023, and I just think that it's important to recognize them, but none of them in California. So I just want to put a shout out and make sure that this gets the word out, and I think it's important for the schools to recognize their leaders in the diversity. So that is my RVT report, and I do want to echo what Dr. Nolan said, and thank you, because I don't think people recognize how hard it is to be the president, and you put in a lot of extra hours, and so thank you for all of your work.
Thank you. Thanks for your report, and I just want to be clear, I think it's a very important report. I just wouldn't have expected you to do it this early on in your, yes, except that you do have quite some time and experience in these matters. So thank you very much for that and for bringing that to light. Okay, so that's the end of our meeting for today. Just to let everyone, oh, sorry, thank you. Public comment. Would anybody like to comment in the room? No. Moderator, would you please open it up to the public online?
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 11, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or simply raise your hand. And do we have any comment from Cal Poly?
No comments.
Thank you. And any comment from the public library? Okay,
No.
nothing. All right. I see no comment from WebEx as well. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to let sort of for tomorrow, I think we'll start with what we tabled from today, which was agenda item 7A3.
And members, to let you know, I did just receive the language from Dr. Miller, which I just forwarded to all of you.
And so that's it. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.